I want to extend greetings to you and assalamu alaikum, peace to all of you. Welcome, my friends, my community members, veterans, peace activists, and I also see many of my students here as well, which makes me very happy. My name is Jameel Haque. I'm an associate professor of history at Minnesota State University, Mankato, formerly Mankato State. And since January of 2020, I've been the director of the Kessel Peace Institute. The Kessel Peace Institute is a center that promotes peace and social justice and is housed in the School of Behavioral and Social Sciences at MSU Mankato. The Kessel Peace Institute was started in 1993 to honor the legacy of Dr. Abbas Kessel under some very great stewardship from Barb Carson, Jackie Vaselli, Don Strasser. The Institute has really flourished in the last, almost 20 years, almost 30 years, apologies. Dr. Kessel was a political science professor at Minnesota State University for nearly 20 years. Born in Iran and educated in England and the United States, Dr. Kessel led a life dedicated to promoting peace and social justice and political activism. At the age of 17 in 1935, Dr. Kessel won a scholarship from the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, that's today British Petroleum, to study civil engineering in England and at the University of Birmingham. After graduating, Kessel accepted a job in Tehran with an Iranian firm connected to the US military. It was during World War II that Kessel saw and experienced the negative effects of war and developed a motivation to promote peace, nonviolence, and social justice. After World War II, Abbas Kessel received an Iranian scholarship to continue his studies in the United States. Now, I know some of you may have had Dr. Kessel when you were at MSU, and I'd love to hear from you afterwards. Particularly about your experiences with him in the classroom. He's just a fascinating man. In 1946, Kessel began his studies at the University of California, Berkeley. Soon after deciding to make America his permanent home, Kessel took a teaching job at the Illinois Institute of Technology and later earned a PhD in social science from the University of Chicago in 1956. At the University of Chicago, Kessel likely studied with Dr. Quincy Wright. Dr. Quincy Wright is an under-acknowledged hero of peace and peace studies. Dr. Quincy Wright provided key advice and work to facilitate the Nuremberg trials and was instrumental in helping to design and found the United Nations. Quincy Wright was an exceptionally prolific author as well, publishing at least 20 books and hundreds of articles. He was a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize and a recipient of the Norwegian Science Prize for the Study of Peace. Any prizes from Norway go a long way in Minnesota. To return to Dr. Kessel, it was during his time in Chicago that Kessel met Ruth Miner, whom he would marry in 1984. Kessel became a United States citizen in 1964, but not before he was interrogated by the FBI, who had been monitoring his activities for several years. In 1966, Kessel began teaching political science at Minnesota State University in Mankato, where he remained for the rest of his career and had a positive influence on countless students. Kessel advocated for nonviolence during the Vietnam War and helped defuse an anti-war demonstration that threatened to turn violent in 1972. This was Mankato's big moment in the anti-war protests. On May 9th, after weeks of escalating tensions, May 9th, 1972, escalating tensions in town, students from Mankato State, Minnesota State University, Mankato, led protests that intentionally shut the town down. There was considerable amounts of tension between local police and student protesters, both due to bomb scares. And I'm gonna see if I can, here we are now at the protests with Dr. Kessel. I don't know if any of you in the audience can see yourselves in the crowd there. Downtown Mankato has changed a little bit, so the actual location of this shot is sort of hard to determine. However, on this day, between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. that day, the protesters occupied the entire town for 5 hours and shut down the highway while law enforcement looked on warily. It was Abbas Kessel that helped to keep the crowds calm during the protests, while another noted anti-war activist, that would be Mitchell Goodman, sought to have the opposite effect. Kessel's approach was nonviolence, while Goodman intentionally fanned the flames of insurrection. Although some minor conflicts occurred, the day ended relatively peacefully. The question on the following day was how to proceed. Goodman wanted to shut down.
Here to be back.
Everything okay, Tommy?
Yep.
Okay. Goodman wanted to shut down the town again, but Kessel's viewpoint prevailed. On May 10th, over 5,000 protesters marched silently through the town. Dr. Kessel's crowning achievement in these events was to keep them from escalating into violence. To put these events in context, the violence perpetuated on the students at Kent State by members of the National Guard had happened almost exactly 2 years before. Kessel was known for giving lectures during demonstrations and for counseling nonviolence. During these tense situations, one student activist, Mark Halverson, noted that Dr. Kessel's method and personality at protests diffused heated situations and, quote, let the air out of the balloon, end quote. Other former students of Dr. Kessel noted that they nicknamed him Dr. Doom due to his worldview and warnings of what might happen in certain situations. Now, who was Abbas Kessel the person? Kessel identified with the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith arose out of Islam in a similar way as to how Unitarianism emerged from Christianity. The Baha'i faith is centered on the need for humanity to find a unifying vision for the future of society, a purpose that Kessel embodied throughout his career. Later in life, Dr. Kessel became a talented gardener who was famous for the wildflowers he planted in his home garden. Because of his love of natural beauty, he promoted the beautification of the Minnesota State campus during his tenure. I wish he had done more. After his death in 1987, Ruth Miner Kessel carried on Abbas Kessel's mission to promote peace and social justice through the creation of the Kessel Peace Institute for the study of peace and change in 1993. When I became director of the Kessel Peace Institute in January of 2020, I inherited a legacy of hard work and activism. Since 1993, this has included conferences, lectures, art displays, protests, and partnering with multiple community members and partners. While I hope to specifically build on my immediate predecessor, Dr. Carol Glasser's legacy of environmental justice and animal rights advocacy, the onset of COVID-19 forced me to rethink what the Institute could and should do. After the murder of George Floyd by our militarized police, I looked around locally for what we could do with an eye, this magical eyes of the professional historian. And when you get it, obviously when you get a historian on the screen, all they want to do is talk about history. And man, I could go on all day. As many of you likely did, acting in the present rather than looking back into the past, we marched in the protests following Floyd's murder and thought about Mankato and its history. History is not an accurate picture of the past. In fact, it is far from capturing the multiplicity of perspectives and insights that billions of humans have had before us. It is instead the story of how we tell ourselves, our origin story. History reflects who we are right now in the present, and more importantly, it projects who we want to be in the future. As such, I decided to take the Kessel into the realm of history, our history, Mankato history. I'm highly aware of the damage that history can do if it's told in an improper way. Personally, I research and write about anti-Muslim bias in textbooks and educational materials, and those problems are pervasive. Obviously, the history of Mankato is one that is deeply troubling, particularly for the relationship between the white colonizers and the indigenous people of the area that they displaced. The largest public execution in US history happened here. The 38+2 happened here, Mankato. Mankato has taken some steps towards reconciliation, and that's good, but there's more work to be done. Sibley Park needs to be renamed. Sibley Park is our Keystone Park. And various events there draw people in from a wide radius in Minnesota. The trials in the US Dakota Wars took place in that park. The sham trials of prisoners took place at that park. The military trials of those prisoners. These trials took place in Sibley Park here in Mankato, and 400 were tried and convicted by Henry Hastings Sibley. Some blame for the US Dakota War can reasonably be laid at Sibley's feet. He misled the Dakota in his negotiations in the 1850s, and this resulted in war. He promised them again during the war that if they laid down their arms, they would be treated justly. They were not. Yet we honor Sibley by naming the very location that some of his injustices and some of his crimes against humanity occurred. We name a park after him. Sibley Park is our showcase park here in Mankato. There are so many alternatives to that name. Geography suggests Riverbend Park, as it's the confluence of the Blue Earth and the Minnesota rivers. Perhaps Mankato or Makato Park. Our Betsy Tacy literary series gives us a heritage that provides us with an alternative name of Page Park. It would certainly be best if we could give it a Dakota name. The Kessel Peace Institute, therefore, has been working to get the park renamed and partnering with many partners. Furthermore, the Kessel Peace Institute is also trying to highlight the positive aspects of Mankato history. On November 12, 1961, church leaders and students at the university worked to bring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Mankato 60 years ago. Dr. King delivered 2 sermons at Centenary Methodist downtown and a keynote address at the high school, of which 1,400 people attended. And all this happened in a single day. I've been working with community members and the production company of True Facade Pictures to create a 30-minute documentary honoring this legacy. We have interviewed professors, community members, high school teachers to try to truly show the depth of influence an event like this can have and how much or how little has changed between 1961 and 2021. While we wrapped up filming last week, we're always looking for people who are either at Dr. King's sermons, the Good Neighbor sermons at Centenary Methodist, or at the keynote address, The Challenges of a Coming Age, to interview, that was at the high school, to interview for the movie. Any other suggestions as to what might be included to help highlight what Mankato can and will be and how it will become a more peaceful, more inclusive, and more welcoming place are always welcome. And for anyone interested in working with the Kessel on any of our initiatives, please contact me, Jameel Haque, at peace@mnsu.edu. That's peace@mnsu.edu.